Welcome to Finance Revealed. Watch the complete video to discover new market secrets. Subscribe now.
What do you expect for the future? Where will be in 5 to 10 years? Will be Bitcoin the superior money? Will it be a currency for everybody, or will it still be the store of value?
Yeah, Bitcoin is largely achieving its goal. Its goal is to be a world reserve currency, a gold 2.0, and it's largely achieving that, which is incredible to see. People forget that when it was worth $10, that's what the whole world thought Bitcoin's probability was of becoming that new gold 2.0. It was a very low probability, and there were a lot of potential ways that Bitcoin could have hit like a permanent downturn or could have died. And so for Bitcoin to survive this long has been incredible. The future holds Bitcoin increasingly becoming a globally recognized store of value asset. That is happening now. So we're in that stage. Over a very long period of time, probably at least a decade or so, Bitcoin might transition to the medium of exchange and unit of account era. And in those eras, Bitcoin transitions to what we would commonly perceive as the euro, the dollar. Yeah. Medium of exchange means that's what we use at the grocery store. That's what we use to go buy a beer. With unit of account, that's what it's priced in. So you've got euros that are your pricing at the grocery store, mine are in dollars. And so Bitcoin has to first become globally held as a store of value, because then people, you can't spend it unless you own it. So we have to go through that era first. And then after we hit a certain critical, kind of threshold of network effect, let's say 30% of a country's population owns Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin's price starts to stabilize. Again, this will take a very long time, like probably at least 10 years. Then Bitcoin will transition to those next two eras where it becomes like a full money, store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account.
Let's talk about your topic. One of your topics is the SuperCycle. And usually Bitcoin goes through these boom and bust cycles every 4 years after the halving. So, and you have been very vocal actually about a different cycle right now. This time you say there will be a SuperCycle, perhaps not a 4-year cycle. So perhaps you can introduce the SuperCycle to the audience, please.
Yeah, so Bitcoin moves in very volatile patterns. You have these big bull runs, and then you have a bear market. Now, Bitcoin has done this multiple times, and it's typically done around the halving. The halving is a supply schedule for Bitcoin. It's how Bitcoins are produced over time, up to 21 million. People hypothesize that that is the method in which the cycles begin. Now, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about that. Just wanted to add that as a note. We've got these 4-year cycles that occur around the halving. These halvings, these cycles have occurred all during a macro or mainstream world bull run. We haven't had a recession since 2008. We've had like little mini ones, but nothing like major, no depression, no recession. And Bitcoin was about to begin, in 2020 was the next halving. So May 2020 was the next Bitcoin halving. And then 2021 was predicted to be the bull run based on historical cycles. So Bitcoin has never had a bull run while people started to distrust their government. That's the whole reason why Bitcoin was created, is that you don't have to trust your government. You can just trust Bitcoin instead. And you can trust the code, and you can trust that no one has control over it, which is really cool and a very different paradigm. But people don't know they need that until there's moments when they don't trust their government. And with COVID, that definitely brought it back into focus, where people started to question, well, what was my government's response to COVID? Was that the right approach? What was my government's response in terms of money printing? So printing off money and creating stimulus packages, was that appropriate? So with that, that really brings Bitcoin's value into focus. Now it makes sense. And that crystallized with the inclusion of a new group called the institutions. The institutions, as I mentioned before, investment banks, hedge funds, they came and bought into the new narrative of Bitcoin being gold 2.0. This new kind of wave of enthusiasm was all centered around Bitcoin Gold 2.0. This is unlike any other Bitcoin bull run before. No Bitcoin bull run before had the institutions, didn't have a recession, and we also had clarity of narrative and easy to understand. There weren't podcasts or great YouTube channels like Mark has here. Back in 5-6 years ago, those didn't exist, and now we've got such great content where people can listen to this interview, understand Bitcoin more intimately, because There are great courses to go take Bitcoin on, or to understand Bitcoin with, or other podcasts.
Yeah.
And so the content increases the amount of folks who understand and get Bitcoin, who then buy into Bitcoin, which makes the cycle bigger. So all of this put together is what I hypothesize might be a Bitcoin super cycle. Bitcoin super cycle would be if it breaks the pattern of previous cycles, and that means that it either has a more bullish cycle or it has a less intense bearish cycle. So I don't think it's highly probable. I think it's possible. And I think that's where a lot of people, when I wrote this when Bitcoin is worth $8,500 back almost a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
People were like, that's crazy talk. There's no way it's going to do that. And now people are like, oh, that's somewhat plausible. I think it's possible. I don't think it's super probable. But essentially, this time is very different for Bitcoin. And it would be strange to find that it would behave normally like all the other cycles before it.
Mm-hmm. So what's your price target actually during this cycle? Where will we see the peak, and when will the super cycle end?
Yeah, that's a great question. So now this is getting into, as we call it, moon math.
No. It's like...
Yeah. Draw some patterns on charts. If we look at historical price movement of the other Bitcoin bull runs, it projects that Bitcoin will be between $100,000 and $300,000 a Bitcoin. This is that's the banded range of probabilistic outcomes based on historical data. As we all know, history doesn't predict the future, but if we look at it that way, that's a good way of looking at what the average outcome might be. So the outcome I'm describing is like over $500,000 of Bitcoin, maybe up to $1 million. And then on the downside, Bitcoin typically in the bear markets drops 80% from the all-time high down to the bottom of the bear. I think we have a less severe bear market, so something much less, maybe like 30 or 40% is what the low is, or 50% versus 80%.
So do you expect that the super cycle or the bull market will end this year or next year?
Historically, if we look at historical patterns, we should reach the peak of the bull market this year.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a super cycle, there could be all sorts of weird things that go on where, a super cycle could also be Bitcoin has like a normal cycle and then goes flat. Like, again, it doesn't have a very intense bear market. So we could see like a more sustained bull run too. Maybe there's we think that we've reached the peak later this fall, and then it dips and then it goes back again in early spring 2022. Mm-hmm. People forget that in 2013, Bitcoin had 2 bull runs in 1 year.
Yes. Yeah.
Or went from $10 to $120 down to, or $10 to $260 down to $80 and $80 to $1,200. So we could have something like that again, which would be, and that would be like a super cycle-esque moment. But I think, based on all historical information, we should see the peak of Bitcoin's bull run this year. But again, it's a guess.
Yeah. Do you expect actually during this cycle, during this bull run, that a nation state will come out in favor of Bitcoin and say, hey, we bought some Bitcoin just in case it will catch up?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that would be a strong sign for the super cycle, would be having a government come in and buy Bitcoin, put it on their, hold it as like part of one of the reserve assets. I think that it won't be the ECB, it won't be the United States, but it might be like a China, Russia, or some smaller country. I do think that, what's interesting about this idea is that there's a game theory component to where you have to play the game.
Yeah.
So let's say the rumor comes out that the ECB has bought Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if it's true or not, because if the US government believes that, or the Fed believes that, and then other central banks believe that, then they might buy in anticipation that could be true. So you go down this mental cycle of, as long as the rumor is plausible enough, it will catch on, and that will force everyone to potentially think about, am I going to be the last bank to buy it? Am I going to be the last central bank to buy it? So yeah, I think that's possible. I think it's pretty low likelihood, but would be a strong signal of a super cycle if a central bank bought it this bull run. But certainly, I don't think it probably won't be the Fed or ECB or any.
Definitely not. They hate it.
Yeah, they hate it. Well,
Clem Chambers, Anthony Pompliano, Raoul Pal, Peter Schiff, Jim Rickards, Gerald Celente, Kevin O'Leary, Warren Buffett, Tyler Winklevoss, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Zero.